steam as we track Queensland railways during their first 130 years. Tonight, we're going to revisit the early days of Roma Street, look at the development of the suburban network lines throughout Brisbane. There's the nostalgia of one of those traditional old railway refreshment rooms, and we'll look at the amazing development from the panting old steamers of a century ago to the future and the tilt trains, which are just around the corner. So settle back in your seats, enjoy the scenery as we ride the rails with the Spirit of Steam Part 2.
Roma Street Station, at the turn of the century. This is the earliest film of trains running in Brisbane. But they were a long time coming to the city. The political sway of squatters and farmers ensured the railways to the rural west were built first. Agitators for a Brisbane line waited another 10 years before the proposal was taken seriously. Even then, skeptics argued the railways wouldn't generate enough business. Luckily, the visionaries won the day. In 1874, a line from Ipswich to Oxley in Brisbane's west opened to little fanfare. North of the Brisbane River, the railway ran from Indooroopilly to Roma Street. In 1875, the two halves were linked by the Albert Bridge in Indooroopilly, named in honour of the Prince of Wales. The Brisbane line soon became the busiest in the colony. But in the summer of 1893, pounding floodwaters snapped the railway bridge in two. It took 2 years to build a stronger, higher span. While work went on, all trains terminated at Indooroopilly, passengers waiting on the bank to be ferried across the river. Demands for a seaside escape from the summer swelter led to Brisbane's first suburban railway. A line from the city to Sandgate opened in 1882. Over the next 70 years, ribbons of rail reached out north, south and east of the city heart. By the 1950s, 1/3 of all train journeys were suburban. A familiar sight were the steam locomotives crossing the busy Woolloongabba five-ways. Years later, the trains are gone, but 5 retired railwaymen have returned. Bus lanes and government offices now occupy the site of the old Woolloongabba depot, once the steam locomotive hub of Brisbane. Drivers Jim Ross and Bill Rogers remember it well.
It's strange to see it like this. It's, you know, we were here as all smoke and steam and everyone running around doing something, but it's all changed, very different.
You would see a hive of activity, men shoveling ashes out of pits, a huge water tower, locomotives taking water, others cleaning their fires. And in the railway hotel, I've seen that bar full of nothing else but railwaymen, black hats, the total bar 2 or 3 deep, nothing but railwaymen.
The boys fondly recall the flag and bell man striding out into Main Street. Like a latter-day Moses, he'd part the sea of traffic, leading a steam engine safely into the depot. Long retired from such dangerous duties is John Shearing. He recalls the day tempers boiled over at the Five Ways.
This fellow got a bit aggravated and he threw the bell. The back window was down on the car and it went into the back seat and drove off with the bell. I don't really believe that the railway recovered that bell, I don't know.
The Gabba depot ceased to exist in 1967. Steam was making way for dieselisation, but the closure was also due to the demise of the successful South Coast line. Even last century, Southport was a popular spot with the well-to-do. Coaches deposited passengers directly onto the beach. By 1889, a rail line linked Beenleigh to the coast. Southport's railway station welcomed the first of many trains. Day trippers left South Brisbane at 9 a.m, arrived just after midday and departed at 4:30 p.m. It was a long, tiring journey for a few hours by the sea. Yet, with the passing years, the line grew more popular.
The South Coast Railway served Brisbane's suburban needs for 75 years until, in 1964, State Parliament closed the line. Financial losses were blamed, but the scuttlebutt at the time suggested political interests in commercial road transport were the real reason.
Among those who mourned its passing, Cliff Mathieson, Gold Coast driver for 22 years.
When they closed this South Coast line, it was, it hurt me, it really did. That's the worst thing that ever happened to me, I think.
Cliff remembers the rail line being ripped up, the hardwood sleepers used to build retaining walls in the new canal estates. But the Ernest Junction tunnel just east of Southport survived.
When we saw the tunnel there, we heaved a big sigh of relief because it was all downhill to Southport.
The tunnel's roof is smudged with smoke and soot spewed out as steam engines whistled through.
We got stuck in the middle of this tunnel that night, and it was pretty hot in there. I tell you, I know what a baker's oven's like after being stuck there that night.
Some predicted that by the 70s, helicopters would replace trains between Brisbane and Southport. Instead, we're set to see a renaissance in rail travel. The new $335 million Gold Coast line will stretch from Beenleigh through Ormo and Coomera to Helensvale, extending later to Robina. The route is much straighter than the twists and turns of the old line. With the speed of an electric train, the journey of last century will shrink from half a day to a little over an hour. At Coomera, trains will cross a bridge spanning 856 metres.
I'm standing on the Coomera River Bridge on the new Gold Coast Railway. This bridge is the longest pre-stressed concrete railway bridge in Australia, and the construction at this length was not something just for a record, but rather it was part of our environmental mitigation program that we conducted in the construction of this railway. We spent considerable time and effort in ensuring that our impact on the environment was the absolute minimum, and particularly in areas such as this, which is significant fish breeding grounds, and a bit further south, down on the Coomera wetlands, we put a large amount of effort in ensuring that we minimised our impact.
The new breed of electric trains will work the Gold Coast line. They'll even have racks for surfboards. A pleasant change from the old Southport stinkers, which once showered passengers with sparks and soot. Next, the evolution of safety on the railways. People have died in train accidents and are killed in 2 months on Queensland's roads. But the railways has seen its share of tragedies.
The worst happened here at Camp Mountain near Sanford almost 50 years ago. This cairn beside lonely McLean Road South marks the spot where, back in 1947, a picnic train crashed off the Debra line, killing 16. Many of the 450 passengers aboard were women and children.
Taking a curve too sharply, the train jumped the tracks and rammed into an embankment. 2 of the 5 carriages telescoped, trapping picnickers in the wreckage. Labour shortages from the demands of wartime were blamed for the disaster. A fireman and driver, unfamiliar with the track, had been the only available crew. Today, a road has replaced the rail line. The only reminder of that ill-fated journey, seams of coal rubble still buried in the embankment. In the early days of the railway, fatal accidents were few due to the need for slower speeds on the narrow gauge. But as the system grew, so did the danger. Single-line collisions were avoided by the use of the train staff system. The staff, usually made of wood and brass, was a token giving permission to travel over a section of track. The station master handed the staff to the engine driver. While it was held, no other train could operate on that part of the line. Later, staves were stored in electric machines at railway stations, connected by telegraph lines along the track. To ensure the way was clear, a staff was withdrawn only if approved by a station master at the other end of the line. The earliest signals were semaphores, warning trains if it was safe to approach a station. In the 1880s, safe working took a leap forward with a new mechanical signalling system called interlocking. Clayton Sokol is the last signalman to be trained at the old Ipswich manual signal cabin. His job is to set the points and signals for an approaching train.
Our cabin is all mechanical, it's all physical effort. And to set the track for a train to come from one end to the other, we have to go through the lock bar, which is the blue one, and I'll show you. Now that's our knocked out points. And our next one is this black one, which is your points. Now that's changed to the track, and then I have to relock it with the lock bar. Now all I have to do is give the signal, which is 47, which is red. The signal will tell the driver that he's got the road to come in and the road is made for him.
It takes a quick mind and a sharp eye to work the confusing system of 52 colour-coded levers. Technology has seen the end of the manual signal cabin. Ipswich is the last to go. Today, all suburban train traffic is centrally controlled.
2FP1, we're right to go, Control. Thank you very much, 2FP1.
At Main, operators track rail movements on a vast control panel representing the entire Brisbane network. In a way, their job is similar to an air traffic controller's. 4 digits designate the type of train, its destination and number. Monitoring a train's route, controllers switch points and change signals with the push of a few buttons. Computers will soon replace the control panel in handling the suburban system. All train movements will be monitored on VDU screens. Those familiar station announcements are already computer controlled. Brisbane's fleet of 100 suburban electric trains safely carries around 150,000 passengers a day. But have you ever wondered how they work?
The electric train picks up its power from the overhead wire, which is 25,000 volts. There is a pantograph which is in contact with the wire at all times that brings the power down via a high voltage cable that comes down at the back of this particular car and then comes along underneath and goes to the main transformer, which is in the middle of this car. The transformer changes the 25,000 volts that comes from the overhead into more usable voltages which are lower, so that they can be distributed to the different control boxes on the train.
Keeping the trains running is a full-time job. Every 8 years, a train is stripped down and refitted with new parts. Over time, dents and defects in the wheels can give a bumpy ride. Repairing them once meant taking a train out of service for days. Now, this $3 million automated wheel lathe does the job in no time. The overhead electric line is isolated for safety, so the train must be hauled in using a rope and winch. Hydraulic clamps lock the wheel into place. The rails retract automatically to give access. A laser eye measures the wear on the wheel. Then the computer judges exactly how much needs to be cut to return to a smooth profile. The tungsten cutting edge, applying 9 tons of pressure, peels the hardened steel away to restore a smooth finish. The end result? A train back on the rails sooner, a much smoother ride for passengers, and tons of corkscrew steel shavings ready for recycling. Next, the Brisbane Railway landmark takes shape. Roma Street in the 1940s. Porters bustling with bags. The crush of the crowd at the ticket window. Before airports, railway stations were gateways to romance and adventure. In country towns, the station was a lifeline to the outside world.
Because in the days before wireless, the days before television, the day before even telephone spread throughout, the railway station was the bringer of news, and again, it was the taker of news to the outside world. Those twin rail lines there were the contact with the larger world for those people out in the bush.
The very first railway station at Grantchester was the work of English architect Sir Charles Fox, who built the famous Crystal Palace. He also designed Ipswich, Laidley and Rockhampton stations. The prefabricated iron structures were shipped from England, but none has survived to present day. For Toowoomba, Fox envisaged a magnificent 2-storey edifice. His original plan still exists, featuring the finest marble, wrought iron and stained glass. But Fox's dream was shattered when the colony went broke. Toowoomba made do with a corrugated iron shed until it was replaced by the present sandstone building. The 1880s ushered in the elegant mid-Victorian style of railway architect Henrik Hansen. Emerald Station was a typical example. Hansen also authored plans for the new Brisbane Central Station to replace a modest makeshift building which had stood for a decade in Ann Street. But his ideas weren't considered grand enough. Architect of the Treasury Building, J.J. Clark, was commissioned to come up with a more splendid vision. In 1899, work began. Curious passers-by inspected progress on the magnificent building. Masonry was railed from Hellerton and lifted into place by steam crane. Graceful columns shouldered the weight of the station. An impressive portico housed the booking office. A tall clock tower and spire added the finishing touch. In July 1901, the splendid new Central Station opened, crowned by a curved roof of iron, steel and glass. Horse and buggies have long since vanished from Ann Street. But Central's impressive station building remains, part of the modern railway complex we know today. Over the years, many of Brisbane's old, quaint suburban stations have made way for more permanent structures. But some of the original buildings, like this one at Pirong-Pili, have survived, though modernisation has robbed them of much of their nostalgic charm. Oxley, an important suburban terminus more than a century ago, has retained its original station building. Thankfully, the heritage value of our railway stations is being recognised. Roma Street, the original Brisbane terminus, is undergoing a $30 million refurbishment. 7 new platforms are being added, and the colonial elegance of the old station building is to be revived. The old first-class booking office, dissected by a wall, will be restored to its circular shape. Graceful archways will frame arcades at either end of the building. from Roma Street, a modern engineering feat is nearing completion. Deep below the CBD, engineers have carved 2 new rail tunnels to service the expanding suburban network. One of the 300-metre-long shafts connecting Roma Street to Central Station passes beneath 20 high-rise buildings. To reduce noise and vibration, millions were spent on rubberised track clips throughout the tunnels. For passenger comfort, these acoustic pods absorb the roar of a passing train. Massive excavation machines shape the man-made caverns. The original railway tunnels, not far away, were built in the 1890s by hand. Workers hammered away at the stone face using a drill rod with a chisel point. Every few feet, the tip was blunt. Fleet-footed small boys, called nippers, ran to fetch replacements. The rock was then blasted with dynamite, a timber framework erected, and the whole process begun again. The painstaking work of those early labourers still serves the rail system more than a century later. Next up, the last glimmer of a railway tradition. Trains come and go. Busy suburban services bringing commuters to the city at the start of the working day. The fast, reliable rail motors making short journeys into the country. But only one train was the pride of the railway.
Passengers for the Wollongong Mail, please take their seats. Train is departing in 2 minutes' time.
The mail trains themselves were the crack trains of the day. The fastest one in Queensland, the one that was probably the most prestigious, was always one called the Sydney Mail. It used to run from Roma Street or Brisbane via Toowoomba and then down to Wollongong, change trains, and then you go down to Sydney from that point on.
The mail train was once the fastest way to travel long distances, and the most comfortable, with dining and sleeping cars of silky oak and plush leather. Passengers, parcels and perishable goods were loaded aboard the travelling post office.
I also carry ice cream for the boys and girls in the country districts. And lastly, the mail itself. The letters and parcels for the post office are loaded aboard. That's why I'm called the mail train.
One of the stops for the Sydney mail train was Toowoomba Station. And it's here that you'll find the last glimmer of a railway tradition.
I will never forget those years. Everything was kept spick and span. All the silver sugar basins, butter dishes and other table accessories. And the cutlery was kept polished and sparkling. And the tables looked lovely with their spotless linen.
These are the memories of a waitress who worked in the Toowoomba refreshment room in 1915. The clamour of hungry passengers is long gone, but the charm lingers. Manageress Dulcie Bartkowski prepares the silverware for the next sitting the way she's done for 43 years.
When I first started here, we didn't have time to bless ourselves. You'd just clean up from one train and you'd have to reset for the next one. 3-course meal, and you'd have 20 minutes to serve it.
Much of the tableware is more than a century old. Certain china pieces bear the crown of King George VI, and the Sheffield silver is embossed with the telltale mark of the railway refreshment rooms.
When we were busy, we'd clean it twice a week. It'd take you about 3 hours to clean the silver.
Best of all, the meals haven't changed a bit.
Oh, yes, Betty. Thank you very much.
Hearty roasts and homemade puddings conjure up happy memories.
Oh, I can only remember coming here when I was a kid, and you'd get down here and you'd have some sandwiches, a cup of tea before you got on the train, and a couple of hundred people around the place. You couldn't move.
As dining cars were introduced on trains, the popularity of the refreshment room declined. This welcome stop for weary passengers, with its smiling waitresses, passed into history, except for Dulcie and her girls, still serving up the past at Toowoomba Railway Station. North of Toowoomba, high on the main range, the spirit of another railway tradition is thriving. In 1914, the department began encouraging staff to beautify stations by planting shrubs and flowers.
Most of the range stations here had a garden on them, and they were very competitive with each other, and in fact there was a garden competition.
When Barry Stone arrived at Spring Bluff 33 years ago, the gardens were a shambles. Over the years, he and his workmates revived them, and Spring Bluff won the coveted garden competition many times. When the station was to be closed in 1992, Gatton Shire and Toowoomba councils came to the rescue. Barry stayed on as caretaker, and Spring Bluff is now a tourist attraction.
You know, most people just think, seems to think it's an oasis in the wilderness. A road that leads into Spring Bluff, you come up through a bush area, and all of a sudden this opens up into this fairy tale.
Presiding over the garden is an ancient plane tree, planted in 1870. It's 125 years old. Barry hopes the tree and the rest of Spring Bluff will be here long after he's gone.
I feel it's of historical and heritage significance, and if we'd have lost this, we'd have lost a piece of our heritage.
Next, train crazy. A steam engine winds its way around the old Marburg to Rosewood branch line west of Ipswich. This historic locomotive and its elegant carriages could have been razor blades and matchsticks by now, except for a dedicated band of railway fanatics. Over 10 years, volunteers from the Queensland branch of the Railway Historical Society have restored the abandoned branch line to working order. 4,500 sleepers were laid in 4 years to rebuild the track. Station platforms and buildings were transplanted from Boondall and South Brisbane. It looks like a graveyard for railway flotsam and jetsam. Instead, it's a place of rebirth for retired rolling stock and engines. Volunteers have spent thousands of hours restoring railway relics. The pride of the line is a PB-15 steam locomotive.
It took 6 years of continuous work to restore it. We pulled it right down to virtually its individual nuts and bolts and things, and we've gone right through it and replaced anything that needed replacing, repaired anything that needed repairing, and rebuilt it right up to a going concern now. And it's completely finished now. Everything works, opens and shuts.
PB-15s were the most common class of steam engine on the state's railways. Now, the loco runs joyrides for the public each Sunday. Among others rescued from the scrap heap is Red Fred. He's the last of Queensland's red rail motors built in the 1920s. This DL3 was one of the first class of diesel locomotives to run on the Queensland railways. It's dwarfed by the familiar blue diesel electrics, which later took over. The Railway Historical Society's Rosewood Museum is a labour of love. With plans to extend the line and revive another 3 locomotives, the work is far from finished.
I guess we all become a little bit addicted to it all. We sort of get hooked, and we've got a working railway here now with all this vintage equipment, and now we want to show it off.
Queensland Rail has its own band of heritage fanatics. At the historic Ipswich workshops, a giant of the railways has been taking shape. The Bayer Garrett was the Rolls-Royce of steam engines, the most sophisticated locomotive ever to run on the state's railways. Imported from Europe in the 1950s, it served until the late 1960s. This one was gathering dust in the museum until the Ipswich team set about restoring it. The Garrett is made up of 3 sections: a leading tender, the boiler, and a trailing tender, along with hundreds of smaller parts.
When it first came in the shop, it was fairly dilapidated. A bit of a mess it was, and we got a crew here on it. We stripped it down and went through it to see what was required, what work was required, and from then on it's just been a slow rebuild process.
Meticulous restoration requires dedication and a touch of fanaticism.
Well, I'm an old railway man. I suppose when I first started here there was a lot of steam engines, and I think this brings it back, the old days. Oh, when it goes out, yeah, it'll be a big moment for me. Hopefully I have a drive it as well.
Nearly a year later, the long hours have paid off. Splendid in its traditional colours of gold and Midland red, the mighty Bayer Garrett is turning heads once again. But you don't have to be big to make a big impression. This miniature machine belongs to Neil Linehan, one of the team which worked on the Garrett. 4 is a scaled-down version of the old steam traction engines.
Well, it's a coal-fired boiler, and it's what you call a self-propelling engine. These were used in the old days as what you see in the modern-day tractor. This one is a scale model, if you can call it scale. It's 5/8 full size, and it's approximately 5/8 of a tonne in weight. And it's no toy.
Neil occasionally takes Thor for a run up and down his street, much to the amusement of neighbours.
It's a bit like the Pied Piper. All the kids come around and, you know, like the kids of today, they haven't seen these things.
If small is beautiful, then this is a railway buff's paradise. South of Brisbane near Beenleigh, it's Australia's and possibly the world's biggest model railway. The train place is run by Bob Harris. Years ago, Bob gave up his job as an aircraft mechanic to model trains, full-time. The decision raised some eyebrows.
Oh, yeah, you have to be some kind of nut to play with trains, I guess. Yeah, that's what they figured.
Nowadays, it's a very respectable pastime.
There's a lot of accountants, doctors, lawyers, and people in the public eye who have their model railways. And we can name a lot of them.
Over 948 metres of track run some of the rarest miniature rolling stock in Australia.
In most cases, there's only a small amount ever made of them. There could be 24, or some cases only 5 or 6, because they are handcrafted. They're all handcrafted in brass, and because they are collector's items.
The train place is an O scale model railway, 1/48th the real size. It took a year to build and opened to the public in 1985. The miniature world of stations, farms and bridges was fashioned from timber, plaster, corrugated cardboard and toothpaste tubes. Health reasons have forced Bob to put the train place on the market. But his hobby is a habit for life.
This model railway, once you get hooked, you get hooked. You don't want to give it away, and I'll never give it away. Once this is gone, I'll still be playing with a train somewhere.
Next up, what's down the track for Queensland Railways? 130 years down the track, Queensland's railways are headed for a prosperous future. At the port of Brisbane, trains are set to steer the state even closer to the lucrative markets of Southeast Asia. Each day, thousands of containers are railed to Fisherman Islands, bound for exotic destinations. Tons of frozen meat and grains are unloaded by massive forklifts and transferred to the dock for export. Because of the lack of uniform gauge throughout Australia, imported goods are transported interstate by road rather than rail. But that's about to change. An $85 million standard gauge link is being built from Dutton Park to Fisherman Islands. When it opens later this year, interstate trains will travel direct to the port with no change of gauge.
That'll give us a network of standard gauge from Brisbane through Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth and connect up all the major ports.
A more cost-efficient rail service and our proximity to Asia should establish Brisbane as the preferred stop for foreign vessels. By 2005, 10 new docking berths and a massive container park will seal the city's superport status, creating a facility to rival Singapore. Imagine hurtling along at speeds of up to 160 kilometres an hour and slashing the travel time from Brisbane to Rockhampton by more than 2 hours. The arrival of tilt train technology will make it possible. Queensland Railways has commissioned the first of these super-fast trains to be built in the Southern Hemisphere. Modelled on overseas systems, tilt trains will usher in a new era in passenger services on the Northern Line. The tilt trains will run on existing track, reaching top speed on the curves. Bogie axles suspended in a rubber unit allow the wheels to adjust to the twists and turns of the track. The carriage of the train swings out on an axis. This has nothing to do with safety or speed. The tilting is for comfort. The train compensates for gravity forces and passengers feel only a fraction of the turn. To create an even smoother ride, track computers will talk to the train, giving it advance warning of curves ahead. The first 2 tilt trains are due to arrive at Roma Street in 1997. On that day, the critics of last century will turn in their graves. The narrow gauge railway they condemned as too light for high-speed travel will carry some of the fastest trains in the world. The future of Queensland Railways also lies in the past. The romance of yesteryear will return in a new tourist experience, the Heritage Train. Railways Commissioner Vince O'Rourke.
Well, it'll be like stepping back into the past. 14 cars, a beautiful train where you'll be pampered and treated to something special. It'll be like the great train trips of the 20s and the 30s.
The Heritage Train will be newly built and on the rails by 1997. Its richly detailed staterooms, club cars and butler service will recall a more gracious era.
We're in the process of becoming a very modern railway, and I certainly believe it's very important as you move into the future that you're mindful of your past and take with you the beautiful things of the past.
After 130 years, Queensland Railways have come full circle.
Through time and space in a furious race, spurning the midnight gales, the steam steed reels on flying wheels over the shining rails. Now this is the dream of the sons of steam, men of the cab and rail, a level track and no looking back from the lure of the homeward trail.